Hey guys, Tarke here. I just want to talk about some of the cool quality of life stuff coming in this next patch, but also go on a mini rant about some of my frustrations about some of the cool quality of life stuff coming in this patch. It's all good. It's just me being a princess. But anyway, let's go on. Although there are a few things which I do think are unreasonable. Right. They've hit the quality on Phantasmal Seismic Trap. My bad. So I was talking about this a lot. Basically, they forgot to update the alt quality. Cast speed used to set how often the waves would go out. They changed that down scales with trap throwing speed. So the alt quality of Seismic Trap gave you 6% reduced cast speed, which did nothing to your build because they changed how that interaction worked, and gave you 100% increased damage. I kept telling people about this. Other people were doing it before I was talking about it. But yeah, basically it was a silly thing. It shouldn't have gone through, but people spent a lot of currency getting their Phantasmal Seismic Traps. It would have been very expensive getting level 21 gems especially. I would have personally just left this sit until next league and fixed it then. This is basically just hurting people who spent a lot of money on something which is now worthless. So this irks me a little bit. The other version of this, which annoys me a bit, is Explosive Concoction. Very similar sort of thing. It's an interaction they wouldn't have intended to happen. But in the grand round of things, I don't think it was really hurting anyone, and I'd have fixed this next league, because this is just straight up nerfing people's builds. So you were able to force a weapon into your offhand by disabling your main hand weapon to get some cool interactions that wouldn't be possible otherwise with Explosive Concoction. So an example of this is you wear a high stat requirement weapon in your main hand. You then no longer have the stats to wear it. So say you needed a 240 int wand. You wear a bunch of intelligence gear, unequip the intelligence gear, the wand is now disabled in your main hand, and your weapon is forced into your offhand. So, some examples of weapons this would be good for. You could use obliteration wands for on-death explosions. You could use Iwa's Mirage to get additional projectiles, especially if you corrupted them. You could use the heist scepters to get stuff like Secrets of Suffering or Elemental Overload. And there's a whole bunch of other uniques you could use. There were some pretty neat and nifty interactions. Explosive Concoction isn't a particularly strong skill. Some people are making it work, but the general consensus is it's okay at best, otherwise quite weak. And the people who were doing this, again, it was a very small portion of people who were doing it. They would have spent a lot of currency either crafting these quirky little stat stick weapons or corrupting uniques. I would have just let this sit through until next league. I think this isn't something they should have done, because it's just, again, it's just hurting people's builds. I'm not a big fan of that. I understand it in the case of, like, insane, your build is, like, the whole delirium stat stacking thing. Sorry, aura stacking thing. But this wasn't, like, making the game a joke. I would have let this go. Most of these other bug fixes are positive. I'm not going to talk about the Royale stuff, because a lot of people don't care about Royale. Right, let's talk about this. We're going to circle back to Instilling Orbs, because this is where my, like, Tarke is going to be a princess rant comes in. And this is very much a very woe is me rant, so don't take it that seriously. So, the can ROG better communicate its upgrades. They're hoping to add some improvements to the UI, which highlights which mods will be affected. And they're also going to be potentially applying this to stuff like Harvest crafting or future crafting systems. This is really positive. Really happy with this change. They're reducing the amount of exhibition ground that cannot have explosives placed on it. Basically, there's lots of random dead space. This should just make the legal mechanic feel more intuitive and smoother, so that's a big thumbs up. This is something we spoke about a lot on Bayclast. We specifically named Sea Witches as one of the big problems. So now, if you have a pack of monsters that can apply cursors, they're going to share a cooldown of curse application, so you like chain spammed with cursors. And this is something I spoke about and requested in the video. They're removing silence from hex font, so that's really good. Really good changes here. Bone Shatter Bug, this is something that I would like championed a little bit on the recent Bayclast, because people kept telling me, hey Tarke, can you talk about this please, because Bone Shatter is really bugged. Apparently Bone Shatter isn't bugged. There's just some like shortfalls with the stun, and the visual representation isn't very clear. Basically, I read this as, look, there's some problems with the skill. They're working as intended, but we'll try and improve this in the future. Technically, it's not bugged. It's kind of like people saying, hey, the skill feels bad. And they're like, well, technically it doesn't feel bad, even though it does feel bad. So yeah, hopefully this will improve. And for people who are having frustrations with Bone Shatter, my apologies. A little bit weird that we have a bunch of skills that did see quality of life improvements this league, but then it seems like for a lot of the other skills, it's kind of like That's it, sorry. Bone Chatter, Explosive Concoction, insert other new skills that Storm Rain visuals, please, please, GGG, Storm Rain visuals. Can Gwenin provide more valuable uniques? Apparently, yes, they're going to increase the chance of getting the more valuable uniques, so that's nice. They're just making the gambling more rewarding. Right, now for Tarke's little rant. This is a good change. I'm really glad they're making this change. They're adding instilling orbs to the crafting bench, so players can directly determine their outcome. They're only doing this for instilling orbs. They're not doing it for enkindling, which I think is a mistake. And it's going to cost instilling orbs and glass blowers. This is something we spoke about specifically on Bay Class. Octavian was like, hey, glass blowers, you just build them up. They're worthless. Make it so they have a currency sync. This seems like a really good change. It's a really good change. They're doing it. So why does this change frustrate me? It frustrates me for a few reasons. The enkindling orb thing I think is very silly that it's not being added on it as well. So they correctly address that having the wrong condition is worse than not having one at all. I agree with that. Enkindling orbs, though, they have multiple outcomes, and their outcomes have big ranges on them. So with instilling orb, there's only one outcome, trigger modifier. There's no like, oh, a better or worse trigger when you are frozen. It's just no. When you're frozen, when you're shocked, when using adjacent flask, etc. The enkindling orbs have a range. I believe it's of 10% on each modifier. I spent a lot of enkindling orbs trying to get 3 increased effect quicksilvers. And I think I spent like upwards of 30 enkindling orbs, and none of them are perfect yet. They're all a bit rough. I would have shoved them on the bench as well, because they have a range. You still would have had to use the bench multiple times to hit the upper portion of the range. If you don't want to shove it on the bench, remove it from a range. Make it so it's always 50% rather than 40 to 50. Because it's just like, you've acknowledged that there's a problem with instilling orbs. You've gone, that's a problem. We're going to relent on that problem. But then you're holding your ground with this. It's the same thing I spoke about in my previous video when it came to the whole splinters thing. I really struggle to understand sometimes the hills that GGG will die. I'm like, no, we're not going backwards on this design. And this just kind of goes into my, like, I'm going to be a princess and super precious right now. I often get very frustrated with GGG when there's the problem that seems very obvious to me. It seems very obvious to other people. We give early feedback. Sometimes we give feedback before the league is even live. So for example, I'm not talking about like alpha or anything. I'm just talking about when we do Bay Class as part of league announcements. Obviously, we see the promo footage early, or at least I do. The others like to be surprised because I need to prepare the topic list. Or like Ziggy, when he does his Q&As with Chris, he needs to see the stuff like the day before so that he can think of his questions to Chris. So there's been a couple of leagues now, like we'll see something like a day or 2 days before or something. And I'll be like, oh, this maybe seems like a problem. And other people like Ziggy might be like, oh, this seems like a problem. We provide the feedback and it gets noted, but nothing changes. Then the league gets announced. People go, oh, I think we could see a problem. And it gets feedback, and sometimes it gets changed. Then the league goes live, and then it's like a week or 2 goes by, and then we get told why things are the way they are, and we get these very like, well, this is the justification, this is the reasoning, and it's like, okay, fine, agree to disagree. That's why it is the way it is. And then the next week, they're like, psych, actually, we're changing it. And I kind of feel like that's the whole thing that's happened with instilling orbs. As soon as I saw instilling orbs, I'm like, this is a mistake. They should be on a bench. This is going to feel really bad, getting the wrong triggers all the time. And then you get the people who try and defend it, be it GGG or like the GGG stands. And people call me like a GGG shill. But like, there are people who will excuse any behavior or like any questionable decision. And then they'll be like, no, you're wrong. This is why it has to be the way it is. This is why it has to be the way it is. And then GGG will be like, actually, no, we were wrong on that. And then those guys shut up suddenly. And it happens to me as well. It's like, there are people who stand me. Like, I'll make a mistake. People will defend me when I know I'm in the wrong. And I have to be like, no, I'm in the wrong here. And then suddenly the people who are like standing me like, shut up. And I find that whole thing so frustrating. Because it's just like, it sometimes just feels like you're just like shouting at a wall. Not shouting, but like you're trying to have a reasonable discussion with a wall. And it's like, okay, this is the feedback, this is the situation, this is kind of where I see the things going, and the wall doesn't respond because it's a wall. And then you're like, okay, it's fine, it's the way it is, you accept it, you're like, okay, we're just gonna have to work with the thing. And then 3 weeks later, the wall's like, psych, I'm actually a person. Yo, rapid change. And I get this is a really precious point of view because basically they've made the change I want them to make, so I shouldn't really be salty about it. And I'm not really salty, just I find it a bit frustrating sometimes. And this might maybe have something to do with the fact that I blew through like 30 instilling orbs before I knew about this change in SSF, and I didn't get the outcomes I wanted. But yeah, I don't know. It should have been like this from the very beginning. I still think Enkindling Orb should be on the bench as well. Generally, this is a very positive set of changes. I do really dislike the Explosive Concoction and the Seismic Trap thing, just because they're just hurting people's builds, and it's like, I feel like if something slips through, as long as it's not like completely trivializing the game, just let players like abuse it for a league and then fix it later. But I don't know. I'm Tarke. Have a good day. Let me know how you feel about these changes, and let me know if you feel like there are other changes you wish were in here or you hope to see added as the league goes on. Apologies for any GGG staff who had to listen to me being very precious just then. I'm Tarke. Have a good day. Bye-bye.